Welcome to Fox Soul's Black Report. This is a space where we bring you Black America's headline news, views, and opinions. I'm Seth Lemon.
I'm Demi.
I'm Romeo.
Peace and love. I'm Nielle.
And on today's report, states prepare for a new round of voting wars as the midterms approach. A member of the Congressional Black Caucus plans to retire, and black lawmakers in Michigan sue to block redistricting maps.
Shaquille O'Neal raises $2 million for underserved kids, and we'll tell you which tennis open the Williams sisters will not be playing in.
We have that and so much more. You know why, because it's our voice and it's our truth. So let's talk about it.
Let's jump into today's headlines as state legislators across the country are beginning to debate potential changes that could restrict voting rights even more. They are weighing reforms even beyond those that were proposed during the 2020 presidential election. And there are dozens of these measures, more than 70 of them across 11 states, according to estimates from New York University. Now, while some officials say the bills could expand voting access, at least 13 of the measures are intended to be more restrictive. The changes include criminal penalties for elected leaders who mail absentee ballots by mass, strict identification standards, and even whether inactive voters should be purged from the rolls. Democrats say they plan to make this a core issue ahead of the midterm elections. And anything with voting rights, of course, Democrats are going to make sure that this issue stays front and center because it's so paramount to every single American, not just a black issue like we said yesterday.
Absolutely. And adding on to a couple of the states that you mentioned, legislators in Illinois, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, they're actually coming up with measures that allow elections officials to purge voters from their rolls if they're inactive, like you said in the story. Also in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin. I mean, so much happening. We don't have to dive deep, but I saw this really good story in the New York Times that said not voting itself, not about voting, that it's not about voting. Let me get you together. I'm sorry. So voting is not the issue. What happens after voting is the big issue. So we saw how Republicans, the example was we saw Republicans instead wanted to make it about there was voter fraud when we saw that there wasn't really voter fraud. So after voting and see what happens after the voting process is what's more important than actually getting people to vote, if that makes sense.
And the big lie, after all that voting didn't help at all.
Exactly. And it stalled everything in the end. So, yeah.
We're talking about 19 states and counting. We know that the South is a stronghold when it comes to voter restrictions, and we know that that is historical in this country. It's the history of America. That's why it is so important that they passed the John Lewis Voting Rights Act on Capitol Hill, as well as the Freedom Act, because we know that federal law trumps state law, and it is so important. That's why Dr. King and civil rights leaders in 1965 pushed Lyndon B. Johnson to pass the Voting Rights Act, because the South was very much so disenfranchising black people. We know that voting rights is an issue for all people, but it's real personal when it comes to African Americans, because we had to fight so hard for equality for all. And that's why we're still on Capitol Hill saying, hey, we need you to pass these bills because the South is disenfranchising people at an alarming rate.
Neil, you are 100% correct. And to the black community and people of color, do not get discouraged. We hear all the things going on, like how they're trying to just provoke you or stop you from getting your vote. Your vote is going to count. The midterms are here. 2022 is here. Before we know it, November will be here. What are we going to do to make sure that we do the right thing and we get the right people in office? So don't get discouraged. Make sure you check with your community, your city, your state to make sure you do the right thing so that your vote will count no matter what.
Yeah, Senator Chuck Schumer is going to have to really buckle down and decide if changing the rules about the filibuster is important enough for this issue to be passed. And we can't just be bound by what we've done in the past because of the filibuster rules. The Senate has to evolve. Congress overall has to evolve. It's just like we do every day. There's the only constant is change.
Yeah, and we know for a fact that the Republicans are not going to play fair. So Chuck Schumer definitely has to do something about the filibuster, because that is the holdup in Congress. We can't get anything done. So it's imperative. Black civil leaders, civil rights organizations have been pushing for this because there is no other option.
Yeah, and I think that's why the New York Times article stuck out to me so much, because it feels like you can do everything right. You can go vote. You can vote for who you wanted to, and then still the Republicans come back and kind of set us backwards. So, yeah, Romeo, like you said, just do what you can to make sure your voice is heard.
All right.
And speaking of Congress, Congressmember Bobby Rush said he is retiring from Congress after having served 15 terms since he was first elected in 1992. This is according to the Chicago Sun-Times. Now, Rush, a 75-year-old former Black Panther, also served as a Chicago alderman, and he told the Sun-Times that he decided to retire in recent weeks after a conversation with his 19-year-old grandson. Rush stated, and I quote, "I want them to know me on an intimate level, know something about me, and I want to know something about them. I don't want to be a historical figure to my grandchildren." Now, Bobby Rush co-founded the Illinois chapter of the Black Panthers and became acting chairman after Fred Hampton and Mark Clark were killed in December of 1969 during a police raid. Another high note in his career is in a 2000 Democratic primary, Rush defeated former President Barack Obama, who was then a state senator running to represent Illinois' first congressional district. Now, we know that over 20-something Democrats will be retiring as we look at the midterms. And so the midterms that are coming up are going to be really interesting to play out. And that's why voting rights are so critical, especially in southern states, because Republicans are doing everything that they can to suppress the vote. And if they could just get a percentage of African Americans not to show up, it could flip the tides for the Republicans. And it is a known fact that President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris would not be in office if it not were for the black vote. And that's why we are seeing this hard push from Republicans to suppress the vote.
Yeah, and when you think about what he has accomplished over his years, like you mentioned, one of the few that can actually say he beat Barack Obama in something, right? A preacher from the Black Panthers. He was a true leader, and I think he set the standard and set the bar really high. So those who follow in his footsteps, those who fills that position, fills that seat, know they have to step up and represent not only all the way across the board, but especially for the black community.
You know, Neil, great point that we are now at 24 House Democrats not seeking re-election in 2022. And so what I really liked the most was that he was honest about the conversation that he had with his grandson. Even though him being 19, I think that it was something really powerful. He's done so much. I'm from Chicago. I tell you guys that all the time. And so everyone in Chicago knows his name. Like, his name rings bells. And he's done so much for the Illinois Democratic Party. And so I think that at his age, what he's been able to accomplish, it's all right for him. Neil, yesterday you were saying it's about tenure. I forgot who we were talking about, that it's about tenure, and we want experienced people, but also he's done a lot. And so I feel like in his position, it's okay for him to, like, you know, hey, I've done all I can for right now, and it's someone to fill those shoes. And Romeo, like you said, whoever fills those shoes, there are some really big shoes to fill.
Definitely.
And I'm just hoping that they can do just a morsel of what he's been able to do.
Yeah, you can't take anything away from the experience that he has, serving 15 terms. And we can debate whether there's a need for term limits and whether there should be a freshening of new blood every so often. But this really demonstrates the problem that we're seeing now. There are a lot of elected officials who are getting older. I mean, with 24 House Democrats retiring or not running again, they're also looking at the new redistricting lines that were drawn. So some of them aren't going to have the same communities that they've represented in the past. And then others just aren't motivated after looking at President Biden's approval numbers. They don't see that the fight is actually winnable. So hopefully we'll get some new fresh blood that can replace these people who are deciding that it's time to exit, but that won't do damage to the overall goal of serving the people.
You know, we also can't forget here, too, that COVID is still happening. We're almost going on year 3. He tested positive for COVID-19 not too long ago, and so he's getting older, and we're actually losing a lot of our political icons right now. And so sometimes it's just wear and tear on your body at this point, too.
Yeah, he's had some health issues, so as he walks away from politics, we pray that he continues to live a healthy life. That's what's important, right? All right, Attorney General Letitia James' office confirmed Monday that it has subpoenaed former President Donald Trump and has 2 eldest children, Ivanka and Donald Trump Jr., demanding their testimony in the investigation to the family business practice. Lawyers for the Trumps filed court papers Monday evening seeking to block the subpoenas, calling them an unprecedented and unconstitutional maneuver and accusing James of attempting to obtain testimony that could then be used against the Trumps in a parallel criminal investigation being overseen by Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg. This is what we're waiting for. This is what we want. We know this family is known for doing bad business. I mean, you check their history, you see what they've done, from even racially profiling people living within their property, their buildings. So This is the time we want this to come to the forefront. Again, we want this push to happen before the midterms. We need to expose what this family is really about, from the January 6th insurrection into the family business. So I do like this step, and you know, Alvin Bragg is going in. He's going all for it.
Yeah.
Letitia James, she is not playing around at all. I absolutely love everything that she's doing. She tweeted, over 2 years of delay tactics won't stop our investigation because no one is above the law. And I mean, that's something that we all know and feel here, but the Trump family, they feel something different. But so the Trump family has 3 options here, what they can do. They can either testify truthfully, and then what happens, they incriminate themselves, possibly. They can testify falsely, and then they face perjury charges, or they can say, okay, I'll plead the 5th, but then that also makes you feel like you did it anyway. So I really feel like they don't have a win-win in this situation. So I just feel like admit you were wrong so we can all move on here.
Look, Trump sued Letitia James's office back in December. He is claiming that she has a political agenda, and that's why he's going after them. So he is not ready to admit defeat or even concede anything, just like he wasn't going to concede the election. But he, quote, called himself an aggrieved and innocent party. I don't think that anybody who is looking at this from the outside would agree that there's no fault at all, but he thinks that this is a hoax, as he labels everything else, and it's clear that her office is not playing.
No.
I think their response says a lot. They are petrified of Alvin Bragg's and Letitia James. We know that Alvin Bragg's has the criminal investigation and Letitia James has the civil investigation. And so they are petrified of what will be revealed. They know what they're up against, and so they are going to do everything they can. Donald Trump is never going to admit to anything of any wrongdoing. That's why it's so important that they pursue, they persist, and they follow this process all the way to the end to try to get our favorite word of 2022 so far, accountability from the Trump organization.
Hashtag accountability.
Hashtag accountability. Absolutely love it. So current and former black state lawmakers in Detroit on Monday announced a pending lawsuit to block Michigan's newly drawn congressional and legislative districts, contending they illegally dilute the voting strength of African Americans. The step came days after the new Independent Citizens Redistricting Commission finalized U.S. House and legislative maps to take effect in 2022. That will last for 10 years. The plans have drawn criticism from black legislators and the state's Civil Rights Department because they slashed the number of seats where African Americans account for a majority of the voting age population. The lawsuit, if successful, would force the commission to revise the maps. And revising the maps is what we have all been asking for here for a very long time. And so we see it all the time. When you're a black candidate, you want to reach out to your base. You want to be able to reach out. If you're, just in my opinion here, I'm just thinking if I was a black candidate, I want to reach out to the black base, the black community, rally those people up together. If I'm a black voter, I want to see myself on the ballot as well. And so with unfair redistricting, you can't really do that. And so someone online really grinding my gears. You got to be really upset. I don't even know this person, but he said these lawmakers are claiming that non-black citizens don't vote for black candidates, and you're missing the point. The point is that we want it to be fair. We want to see ourselves. It's not that a black candidate doesn't feel like non-black voters won't vote for them. It's that we want to see ourselves on the ballot, and that's point blank serious.
We don't live in a vacuum, so you can't win in an election with just one race. No one can. Right. I mean, it takes a combination of everybody. I think that this is the first of several lawsuits that we're going to see in regards to these Michigan redistricting, in regards to redistricting all over. Some of the communities here in California are concerned about being separated or being combined, and we're going to see that process play out all over. Now, whether it's actually a fault of the people doing it intentionally and violating the Voting Rights Act, or if it's just what happens as people move, as populations shift. I mean, that'll be for the courts to debate, but there probably will be some cases that have merit and that deserve to have those lines that have been drawn maybe reevaluated.
Yeah, a couple of things. This coming out of Detroit, I think that this is significant because we know that Detroit is 90% African American, right? So they have a real case to say that, you know, that black people are being disenfranchised. And another civil rights activist in Detroit said, because what they're saying with this redistricting lawsuit is that, you know, it can benefit Democrats. However, this isn't a Democrat or Republican situation. This is a minority situation in having fairness for all. We know a couple of weeks ago we covered this story, and that the redistricting committee had meetings and didn't allow the public to come in. That is not acceptable, because the public should have a say in how their maps, the congressional maps, their school board maps, and any other maps are drawn. So that was a red flag. So I think that it's important that we pay attention to this case, because this is definitely another play in the Republican handbook to disenfranchise people of color when it comes to voting and representation in their communities.
That's exactly what they're doing. I mean, the city had 5 states in the districts. Now it's going to have 8 under the new map. To me, it sounds like they're trying to thin out the vote. They're trying to spread it out so that that vote that normally has a certain impact won't have the same. So we'll see what happens with this moving forward.
All right. In international news, U.S. authorities arrested a man accused of murdering Haitian President Jovenel Moïse. Now, this is the first person to face prosecution for his killing, and it comes as Haiti's prime minister just survived an assassination attempt after a shootout over the weekend. An official statement said that bandits and terrorists shot at the Haitian leader while he was inside a church during a ceremony celebrating Haiti's independence. People began scrambling, running, and hiding as the armed group fired into the cathedral. And police haven't confirmed whether anyone died, but Haitian media outlets are reporting that 1 person was killed and 2 others were injured. Since President Moïse's assassination in July, crime rings, they've been gaining territory and power there as those gangs really ramp up. And we've seen kind of some tense, violent situations in Haiti over the past few months. I mean, the kidnapping of the missionaries, along with the assassination, and now it seems that the traditional political power is kind of running from these gangs that are overtaking, and they're not holding back. They're firing into mass events just to be able to get rid of that leadership.
Yeah. You know, we've been covering this story, of course, the passing of Jovenel Moïse since it happened. And Haiti is just, like you said, just been going through so much. And so I know for me and, of course, all of us here at Fox News Black Report, we just send our prayers to Haiti, because I couldn't imagine living under these conditions and so much trauma just happening over and over again.
Yeah, I think about that. You know, like you said, we talked about it going into the end of the year in hopes that the new year would bring better things for them. And unfortunately, this is happening. So who knows what's in store down the road, but we will definitely continue to send prayers.